Well, thank you so much to all of you for being here. We really can't tell you how exciting it is to see a room full of people who are interested in smuggling. When Luigi, Achille, and I, well, Luigi was first of all, the Italian mafioso reaching out a couple of years ago saying, we need to do something on smuggling. And of course, you're not going to say no to an Italian mafioso, right? So I was like, sure, let's go ahead and get started. So we are very excited and very grateful that all of you are here. And of course, once again, thank you to Chief Manjarrez for giving us the opportunity to have this day, just for us to discuss with you our research and to answer your questions. One of the shortcomings that we have noticed over the years, the work that we do on smuggling, is precisely the fact that as scholars, we stay here on campus at the universities, and we don't reach out to you who are the experts, right? And so when we come together, we're like, oh, guess what? I have figured out that this has been happening for 20 years, and all of you as professionals go like, dude, I've been handling with this for 35, So these conversations, are really enriching to all of us. So thank you for being here. We'll be more than happy to talk with you. We'll leave enough time after the presentation so that we can have a conversation, and you can reach out to the people who are here today. That all of us are so interested in learning from the work that you do. So thank you for being here. And what I'm going to share with you today is, okay, it turned out a little romantic, obviously. Okay, so what I'm going to share with you today is very recent work that, along with my colleagues from the Universidad Autónoma de Ciudad Juárez, I have been carrying out in both Juárez, Ciudad Juárez, and also through some interviews that we have been carrying out with circuit miners. Circuit miners are the kids who work who in the facilitation of border crossings, involving either migrants or drugs. So as new as this information is, I'm sure and certain that several of you have direct contact with this population, and we would love to hear your comments. So again, I'll just try to go through the presentation as fast as I can so that we can answer questions, and of course feel free to make any comments that you see that you think pertinent. So let's just go ahead and get started. This is too modern for me. There it is. So we cannot talk about circuit miners or the work that the kids do along the border without talking about unaccompanied minors on the border. Those of you who have to handle with kids on a daily basis, and I see that with our students at the National Security Studies Institute, there's that concern over their very presence. We see kids from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, and their presence is indeed significant. And not only here in the El Paso sector, but also in South Texas, as you know, where most of this population is arriving. However, Mexican kids represent a significant number of unaccompanied minors, as you know, but most of the attention has gone to those Central American kids. There is a relatively recent project that was put together at the Pew Research Center in DC, and I want to share with you the numbers right here. So only in 2014, out of 11,000 apprehensions, only 24% of those kids had been arrested once. So that leaves about 76% of them, having crossed the border, attempted to cross the border repeatedly. 76% indicated the multiple arrests. 15% of them had been apprehended at least 6 times. So that gives you an idea of the circular pattern that is, again, very characteristic of circuit miners. So here we start taking a closer look at unaccompanied minors from Mexico. Where are they from? Because, again, they are not just coming from all of the states all over the country. So this is a map from the country right here on the street. And as you can see, the majority of the children who are being apprehended at the border and who are of Mexican origin are from the state of Tamaulipas. And I'm sure that you know, for most of the people in the room, that is the territory of a couple of very visible transnational criminal organizations. So that is where the majority of the kids are coming in. Another very important sector, you know, of activity is the state of Sonora. Chihuahua, as you can see, which is our state, our neighbor state to the south, is not as represented. However, most of those who participate, or most of the children who are apprehended from the state of Chihuahua, are kids who live in Juarez. As you can see from the, is that the one? Yeah. The clustering right here, the ports of entry, and the location. There are other kids who are also fleeing for regions of the country, primarily in the states of Michoacán, Guerrero, and Oaxaca, which, as you know, some of you may know, have also seen a significant level of drug trafficking activity and violence over the years. So about a third, once again, of all the unaccompanied children that are apprehended at the border, you know, come from those two states, you know, Tamaulipas and Sonora. And Chihuahua's children are a matter of concern, primarily for those of you who work in this sector, in part because they have not been that studied. Chihuahua, you know, Ciudad Juarez, has, in a sense, despite the criminal activity that we get to see in the sector, we are not as visible when it comes to the characterization of border violence as Tamaulipas, with the activities of Los Zetas and the Cartel del Golfo. But most of the children who are assisted in Ciudad Juarez, and we're just waiting now for the person who has actually been doing the work directly with the children, they come from neighborhoods in the periphery of the border fence. And I'm going to show you a map that indicates precisely what these neighborhoods are, you know, where the kids live. So, you know, one of the, of course, as academics, we love to come up with fancy terms and words for, you know, to name specific populations. Mexican scholars have started to define this population as niños de circuito, or menores de circuito. This is primarily used for juveniles who are, again, involved in the smuggling of drugs and people. They are primarily working as couriers or guides or lookouts. And can I just get a general sense who has been in contact or has had experience with any of these kids or population? You want to raise your hand? Thank you. So the majority of these kids reside in the colonias that are in the very near proximity to the border fence. And their ages range between 6 and 17 years of age. My work has looked primarily at the social organization of the dynamics of coyotes. And I remember interviewing migrants primarily in Arizona who would tell me about these kids, but I had never had direct contact with them. It was only maybe about a couple of years ago when I started to receive calls in connection with a program that was put in place by CBP, which was the Juvenile Referral Program, regarding these kids who had anywhere between just a couple of contacts with CBP to up to 26. And again, most of them are, and I think this was one of the questions that kept popping up during the conversations during the day, the majority of them are boys. There's the work that I have conducted on smugglers over the years indicates that there is indeed a very important presence of women, females. However, their work is pretty invisible many times. Of course, if you ask the smugglers, they will tell you, las viejas hacen todo. The ladies are in charge of everything these days, right? Now they complain about the fact that it's the guys, the ones who get arrested. But women in general in the market of smuggling on the U.S.-Mexico border, women perform activities that are seen as peripheral or non-important. But imagine, holding people at your house, having to feed them. They nurse They take care of migrants who have been injured along the way. They take care of kids. I'm sure that you have seen that, some of those patterns on how the kids who are U.S. citizens are taken into the safe houses while the parents do the trek on foot. So, but the majority, again, of those who are involved in migrant smuggling are, or the most visible, let's put it that way, are males. What makes these kids important for the organizations, right? Because those are some of the aspects that we're thinking in terms of the groups and how they operate. That's what we really want to know. First of all, it's of course their age. The kids report, as well as organizations, that, since they are not going to face any charges, that it's very easy to employ them or to use them to bring in the drugs or to bring in people. But most importantly, these are kids who have grown along the border. They know the ways. They play football. They hang out with their friends and family right next to the fence. They go to the parks. They have friends and family who are also involved. So this is one of the main factors, rather than any others that may be more criminally oriented, and we'll take a closer look at those as well. Today we have all the presentations. Factor that they have had in common is how most of the people who are involved in the facilitation, most of the people who are involved in smuggling, are defined as being poor. People who are poor, and that's why they become involved in smuggling. But I will rather say that people, it's not because they are poor. They see smuggling as a way to move away from that poverty. So they see this as a mechanism, in a sense. And there are other reasons, because many times they just focus on the financial aspect. And we'll take a closer look at what the kids themselves report as the reasons that they have to enter the market or to stay, or to, in many cases, want to leave and exit the market. But in terms of some of the profiles, they are will be very common. They are members or the kids of single mothers, or mixed families that come together in Juarez. Kids from different mom and dad. There's also very high levels of they drop out of school. Simply, they get tired. They say that it's boring going to school, that they don't see any challenge, or they don't perceive school as being interesting enough. Some of them do show patterns of addiction. The work that I have done has also shown that addiction many times emerges during their participation in smuggling. It doesn't predate that participation, but it's actually a consequence once they have enter the market and work in it. So maybe you can, and you also have your slides. I don't know how clearly you can see the map on the slides, but this is, not that one. So we are right here. This is UTIP. This is the border fence, And these are the 3 colonias or neighborhoods where the majority of the kids come from. Felipe Angeles, as you can see, it's in the periphery, really close by. Ampliación Felipe Angeles, which is this neighborhood to the part right here. And Puerto de Anapra, or Anapra as we call it here, just more locally, which is, as you can see, very close to Cristo Rey, where several of us perhaps go hiking. This is the sector of the fence that is just being rebuilt. So many of these children really just have to walk to, as you can see, throughout, very close to their neighborhoods. They don't really need to go that far. So what are the reasons that would lead to a 7, 8, 9-year-old into participating in the smuggling of migrants, primarily of migrants? And I think we need to situate them, first of all, as another fancy term, structural vulnerability. We are talking about communities along the border in neighborhoods that lack basic services, where education is not a priority, not only for the kid, but also for the city, right? Ciudad Juarez wants workers. They don't want an educated population. So there is a lack of opportunity of educational, recreational opportunities. There's also, of course, the very, the immediate proximity of Juarez to the city of El Paso. Also the perception among older smugglers that children from Mexico can be returned within hours. So as soon as they are arrested, they can just be sent back. And they, without facing any consequences, which, when I've interviewed several of you have expressed this frustration, when this kid's being arrested continuously, finding them, over and over. There is also a very much culturally based perception for those of us who are of Mexican American or Mexican origin in the sense of what makes you a man. For those of us who were raised in low-income working class families, perhaps without a dad, growing up was about getting finding a job as early as you can, as soon as you could, especially if you had younger siblings. So it was about going out there to support your family, to provide for your family as the oldest man, as the man of the house. So in these cases, many of the families are, the head of the family is a single mom. So the oldest son is perceived as the one who has to go out and take care of the family, take care of the younger siblings. So don't tell the chief that I'm giving you the answer to the question on the post-test. How are the children recruited? Because, and this is a question that often, comes up when we think about crime and criminality, I'm sorry. But the kids, the way they are recruited to participate is actually very similar to that of adults. They grow up, they have friends, they have family members who are already involved in smuggling. So even though many of them are forced, in the sense that they may be walking down the street from work or from school and they get, and some of these adults or some of these organizations may come and force them to work. Most of them do it, and here it's, in quotes, voluntarily, as a result of an invitation from friends, neighbors, older siblings that tell them, hey, you're not going to school, you're not doing anything, just come and hang out with us. Initially, this is, again, a very friendly invitation for them to join the market, and one that the kids find very exciting. Imagine being 11, 12, and being invited to hang out with older guys who are doing, this kind of work. So there's an excitement factor initially for these kids. There's also, of course, as I mentioned, the intimidation that takes place in these communities that is very real, and that involves older, not necessarily adults, sometimes just older kids, 14, 15, 15-year-olds that are a little bit more experienced. Something that is also very common among facilitators of all ages is an entrepreneurial sense. Sense that, hey, this doesn't look that bad. I can make anywhere between, $400, $700 a week. I'm 11. Hey, I'll do it. I'll look for these opportunities. A few days ago, I was interviewing one kid who was telling me, I just look for them. I look for these opportunities. I just went through. I spoke to different people, and I found the one that better suited my wishes, what I really wanted to do. So many of them, they also want to be independent, in line with what they see or they perceive as independence. Living in these communities, having a car, being able to buy clothes that they like, being able to protect or give or share, rather, their earnings with friends and family members. However, we must talk about the vulnerabilities that the kids face. And of course, again, initially this may be very exciting to them. Hey, I get to bring groups of people to the border, I get them across, it's cool, right? And perhaps, looking into our own experiences, perhaps at some of, when we were teenagers, we found something that we really liked, that we really enjoyed, and that very soon got boring. And that is in many instances the case of these kids. They work for a couple of months, they get very excited, they find it intriguing, they get to hang out with older guys, they get to see things that they were probably not seeing at home, but after that they get tired because they are asked to be at work at a specific time. They are there's this growing sense of obligation that is imposed onto them, and they are not as excited as they initially were. There's also, of course, power differentials, right? You're working with people who are older, who already have a reputation in your community as being dangerous, or as being very much involved in a specific activity, and that you cannot really say no to. Imagine as a 12, 13-year-old having to articulate, you know what, I don't really want to work with you anymore. So those are some of the factors that also take place. This doesn't mean that their participating in smuggling doesn't mean that your parents as a kid don't love you. Many parents are actually, they do constantly express, extreme concern over the safety of their kids. However, they do not have the necessary tools to allow for the kids to exit the market. Many families actually become to depend on the income that these kids generate. So the thought of them stopping working, actually is actually scary in some instances. Of course, another factor is, the very fact that these kids are, even if they decide to stop, they are not moving away from these communities. They are still going to stay in Anapra. They are still going to stay in Juarez. So they are not moving away. Their families are still there, and the conditions or the circumstances that put them in that led them to enter the market are still there. And in the case of law enforcement, there's of course a sense of mistrust. When you ask them, like, why didn't you go and ask for help? Like, hey, I can't trust anybody. I can trust the police in Juarez. Well, can you trust CBP? Can you trust immigration? And they would say, no, we can't trust them either. And there's that sense of that everybody's watching them, that somebody's going to go back and report them. And in that sense, there's all of that acting out that you have probably seen in some of your encounters with them. When many times they also make self-incriminatory statements about what they do, or how they, or the roles that they perform within an organization. And the work that I have been lucky to perform along with my colleagues from the UACJ, try to, rather than just looking at the criminal aspects of it, we're trying to figure out, to sort out, how do we help them? How can together, all of us, combined, come up with an alternative that would tackle some of these conditions, some of the challenges that the kids face? Well, first of all, when it is important to notice or to highlight the fact that the conditions that many of these kids face are defined by international protocols as forms of human trafficking. They are performing forced labor. Another aspect that we need to keep in mind is we have this perception of the smugglers, of how they are, how they operate. And the work that we have been lucky to carry out over the last few years, several of us, has involved reaching out to these communities, to the smugglers themselves, and so that we can better understand how they operate. Because most of our information, most of the intelligence is that, not necessarily the intelligence on this side, but most of the data that migration scholars have collected over the years come from victims, not from smugglers themselves. So the work that we have trying to do, and as a collective of researchers, and that's what we were lucky to have such a great international crowd today, is because we want to understand, we need to have a better understanding of how smugglers themselves work. And we also have to understand, once again, that while poverty is a factor, that poverty, inequality don't just show up or just happen. There are other causes that are motivating this participation on the side of the kids. My friend and colleague, Fernando Loera, I was, just keep looking to the back of the room, hoping that he will walk into the room. He was the director of El DIF. So El DIF was the México Mi Hogar. That was the shelter that was receiving the children who were being sent to Mexico following their processing and identification as menores de circuito, as circuit children. And he was the one who has been collecting the data on the children and the numbers, over the last few years. So the numbers for 2016 actually cover all the way from January through October. By the end of the year, the number surpassed those. So the number of children, in follow-up programs being served by the shelter had actually surpassed that of 2015. So we see a clear increase over the last 3 years of the children who are entering the market and receiving services or being actually referred for services to the shelter in Juarez. The shelter is trying to tackle some of the challenges that the kids face, and for that matter, they have developed this multidisciplinary systematic approach that involves individual or individualized attention with the kids. As soon as they get to the shelter, they are screened, they are interviewed, they are assigned a psychologist, and they are also assigned a social worker who can work with them through the process to see if there are any resources or any opportunities that they can be canalized into so that they can improve their chances at leaving the market. So, just look at some of the numbers right here in terms of the kinds of service that they receive. So they are assigned to one social worker, one psychologist who works with them and with the family. The kids are also provided with education. As of last year, there was one social worker for 150 cases. The same applied for the psychologist. In terms of education, the kids had, there was a smaller group of students, and they had, they were receiving regular subjects, for elementary and middle school. Almost done here. I just want to also bring up one case that perhaps some of you are familiar with. In response, in a sense, to the challenges that CBP was facing, with these children being, coming in constantly, and circulating through the system, the juvenile referral program was put into place. This was in 2014. And the goal was to detect and retain children who were eligible for criminal prosecution given their involvement in smuggling. And the program started in South Texas. And from there, it extended to other border sectors. And this, the children would be, perhaps detained along the border, and then from here, they were placed in other detention facilities throughout the country. One of there's estimated about 500 children went through the program, which lasted about a year and a half, and it has, it was discontinued in 2015. And this was primarily in response to civil rights organizations that expressed concerns over the fact that the children were being held by for indefinite periods of time, and often in high security facilities for a population that was considered high risk. Many of these children had been witness of cases that were connected to human smuggling or drug trafficking. They themselves have been participating in some of these offenses. So there were, of course, concerns from the side of law enforcement. The ACLU also filed a case to get access to some of this information in terms of what was happening to the children and for how long they were held in custody. One of the recommendations that emerged from the juvenile referral program experience and that multiple organizations that work with children, work with minors along the U.S.-Mexico border have expressed is the need for better screening tools when it comes to human trafficking offenses. And this this improvement when it comes to screening tools, again, has to come not only from the American side, because we do recognize that most of the demands have been placed on U.S. authorities. And you're not screening, you're not providing, some other organizations are making statements about U.S. agencies not screening properly for trafficking or for fear of, claiming that many of the children would actually qualify for relief under international conventions. At the same time, we are very much aware that the Mexican government is not doing, their share when it comes to also screening them or identifying them. Most of the children who go back to the shelter, who are sent back to Mexico, rather, go back to the módulo on the border, and then from there they are most of them are immediately picked up by smuggling facilitators so that they can go back into the business. So the Mexican government doesn't really have any measures in place that would ensure the protection of the children once they go back to Mexico. In the case of the shelter was only attending about 25% of the children who were being returned. So the numbers that I showed you, the 150 families that they were working with, were only representative of about 25% of the children who were being sent back. This is just a quick collage that they put together on the activities that the kids would perform at the shelter. And we'll be very happy to open that's what we were doing next, just opening the conversation for any questions that you may have. The slides include the contact information for all four of us who are working on this project, and so if we don't get to talk with you today, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to share our information with you. Thank you so much, and I'll be happy to take questions.